A political gaffe is a phenomenon whereby politicians accidentally say what they really mean. President Joe Biden is prone to them, and he just fell into perhaps the biggest one of his career.
Are you ready to choose freedom over democracy? Because that's America.
Yes. That's America. You ready to choose freedom over democracy? Many on the left and the right will say that he misspoke. I think this perfectly sums up what the liberals are pushing. We know that they don't care one little bit about democracy. The way that we know that is that every time they lose an election, they say it's a threat to democracy, which makes no sense because democracy is government by the people. By definition, whatever the people vote for is a triumph of democracy. But when the liberals say democracy, they don't really mean democracy. They mean liberalism. When liberals say democracy, they really mean freedom, or at least their own specific, modern, perverted conception of freedom. They don't mean the classical conception of freedom, which is the right to do what we ought to do. Mumford and Sons summed up the classical understanding of freedom in their song, The Cave. I need freedom now. I need to know how to live my life as it's meant to be. The liberal conception of freedom explicitly rejects living life as it is meant to be. It's not about conforming to a norm. It's about deviating from it. That is what the liberals are pushing, whether voters like it or not. Most voters want to stop transing kids. Democracy says we should stop transing kids. Liberal freedom says we must trans kids. Guess which side Biden goes with? Biden sides with transing the kids. Most voters want to secure the border. Democracy says shore up the border. Liberal freedom says we shouldn't have a border. Biden opens the border. Most people want secure elections. Democracy says we need election integrity. Liberal freedom does not care about elections at all. Biden and the liberals gut election integrity. Lots of conservatives, by the way, would also choose freedom over democracy. Not the fake freedom that the liberals offer, but real freedom. Natural rights kind of freedom. Voters want to overturn the Second Amendment. Well, most conservatives aren't going to care. We are still going to defend our rights. We're still going to defend our freedom, which makes this Biden gaffe perhaps the strangest one of his career, because everyone is pretending that his statement is totally crazy. But everyone's answer to Biden's question deep down is yes. I'm Michael Knowles. This is the Michael Knowles Show. Welcome back to the show. Can a sexless marriage be a happy one? That's what the libs are asking in an article that is going all around the internet. We will talk about that in a moment. First of all, I want to talk about Pure Talk. Go check out Pure Talk today. You know what else I want to talk about? Great news. The Mayflower Cigars 8-cigar sampler is back in stock. This is not the 8-cigar sampler. This is a nice box of Mayflower Dawn. The best-selling product in the Mayflower cigar launch has been the 8-cigar sampler. That is pretty much every size of both blends of Mayflower cigars, Mayflower Dusk and Mayflower Dawn. And it's sold out instantly when we launched. And then every time it's come back in stock, it's sold out almost instantly. It is the perfect gift. It's a perfect gift for yourself if you just want to try the cigars in pretty much every size we've got. And it's a really great gift. It looks beautiful. I gave one to a friend of mine yesterday. And they've been out of stock for a really long time. If you want to get the perfect gift for Father's Day or any, I don't know, just like Tuesday, you know, gift for your boss, gift for your friend, gift for your son, graduation gifts, go to MayflowerCigars.com right now. I don't know how long they'll be in stock. Probably not very long. They're terrific. And somehow they're under $100 a box. Probably should check with the old CFO on that because that seems a little bit low. But in any case, go get them now. MayflowerCigars.com. You have to be 21 years or older. Some exclusions apply. Not to put too fine a point on the liberal preference for freedom, their version of freedom, over democracy, some Princeton professor, Eddie Glaude, just went on MSNBC and explained that if Donald Trump is elected, if the people choose Donald Trump to be the next president, then democracy is over.
Democracies require certain kind of people to work. And we just got to be better people. So we have to understand who we are, right? And what I'm looking for is a politics of tending. A politics of tending where we tend to each other's everyday, ordinary lives on the ground, close to the ground, Nicole. I'm looking for a coalition of the decent, a coalition of the loving and caring, folk who want to finally rip us away, finally untether us from this nonsense that has produced this.
I feel like the other part of it is there's no more sort of private self, and right, like everything that you do is this desperate, I think, need to connect to other people who want to be part of what you just call the coalition of the decent, right? Because we're racing against time. It feels like this election will be decisive if we can come back from this.
Yeah, if Trump wins, I think democracy is a wrap in the country.
Okay, so that statement from a Princeton professor, supposedly, is nonsensical. It's, of course, a contradiction in terms. What the people vote for cannot be the undoing of democracy. It necessarily has to be the triumph of democracy. If you're electing a Democratic leader who is, even if the Democratic leader is not the preference of the liberals. So they're talking about liberals here. But then the whole rest of this segment, it sounds like a late night freshman year pothead bull session. Man, I just want a coalition of the decent, man, to untether us from all the stuff, the nonsense, man. I know. I feel you, Professor. It's a race against time for in the private and the public and my inner self and my outer self, and without going out of my mind. You're waiting for the sitar to come in. What are they talking about? The point that I think the Princeton professor is trying to get to is that democracies and republics require virtuous citizens. But he can't use the language of virtue because that's the language of the conservatives. If that's the case, then we should allow the conservatives to shape our democracy. So he has to use this liberal hippie language. We need to be kind and empathetic and big libs, basically. And then Nicole Wallace, I have no idea what she's even talking about. But the upshot of everything they're saying is the problem is not that we have too little democracy, but too much. Because Donald Trump might actually get elected. The people might actually get their wish, and they might be able to make this man the president again. And that would be really terrible. So their complaint here is not that our democracy is crumbling. Their complaint is that we have a democracy and they don't like the American people, and they don't want the American people to get what they want, because what the American people seem to desire right now is something that is more conservative and not particularly liberal. So they would happily just choose the liberal freedom regardless of what the people want. So what does liberal freedom look like? Viewer discretion advised. This is a report from The Publica. A gay politician in Spain has abruptly resigned from his post after photos began to circulate showing him eating his own excrement. This is Daniel Gomez del Barrio. He was a counselor with the governing left-wing party. You'll be shocked to hear he's a left-winger. It's always the ones you most expect, isn't it? But the story actually isn't even that this guy has a weird sexual fetish and he's resigned his position. The story is the people who are defending him. So Peter Boghossian, you might remember Peter Boghossian. He's been on this show before. Peter is an atheist and a philosophy teacher, and he really came to prominence because he and James Lindsay put out the grievance studies hoax, and it was really, really funny. James Lindsay, mathematician, who now is a political speaker as well. They made up a bunch of fake grievance studies, academic papers, but on total nonsense, and then got them published in peer-reviewed journals to show what a farce academia had become. It was really, really funny. So that's how Peter Boghossian got onto the radar of a lot of conservatives. But Peter is not a conservative. Peter is an atheist, for one, and is a liberal. He might call himself a classical liberal or not exactly a progressive modern liberal, but he's still a liberal. And it's stories like this that show the huge chasm between the so-called classical liberals and the actual conservatives. Boghossian responds to this story about the excrement-eating left-wing politician in Spain and says, unpopular opinion, mind your own business and leave the guy alone. Leave him alone. Who cares if our elected representatives film themselves eating their own excrement? That's none of your business. Stop policing other people's behavior. Get out of other people's bedrooms. I don't know, man. I agree. We're not going to send the purity police around to look into people's windows, but if a statesman is eating his own excrement, that would seem to be a sign of lunacy. That would seem to be a good sign that he should not be representing me, that he's not fit for that job. And so some people pointed this out in the comments, and Peter doubled down. And he said the comments here are not merely authoritarian. They demonstrate pervasive normative rigidity that comes from Christian fear of judgment, the downside of Western supremacy mindset. So this is not only authoritarian, it shows you what happens when you have a Christian society. These Christians, the moment that you give them a little bit of power, all of a sudden, they're going to outlaw eating your own excrement on camera. Well, they might not even outlaw it, but they won't even let you sit in the House of Parliament if you film yourself eating your own excrement. These Christians, they need to loosen up, man. Live and let live a little bit. That is classical liberalism for you. It is a reminder that even the American right is still kind of stuck in the language of the mid to late 20th century, when liberals tricked all of us into thinking that America was a liberal democracy. That's when that term really skyrocketed in usage. That's when we started to describe ourselves that way. George Washington would not have described America as a liberal democracy. Andrew Jackson would not have described America as a liberal democracy. That is a second half of the 20th century kind of thing. And it's convinced even a lot of right-wingers. So we say, we're the true liberals. We're the real liberals. Okay, those leftists, those progressives, they've betrayed liberalism, but we're the true liberals. I ain't a liberal. I'm not an old liberal. I'm not a new liberal. I'm not a middle of the road kind of liberal. I'm a conservative. I think liberalism is wrong. I think it's got a false anthropology. I think it has a false conception of freedom that is totally in contradiction of the classical conception of freedom, which will actually set you free, because the classical conception of freedom, the Christian conception of freedom, is grounded in truth and the acknowledgement that we can tell the difference between good and bad and right and wrong. And we have a political freedom, not just an individual freedom, but a political freedom to live in a flourishing society. And that means stopping our politicians from eating their own excrement. Okay. It's weird because this is a literal thing that has happened. It's a real fact of a news story, but it is such a great analogy for how our politicians leave today. Which way, Western man? Classical liberalism or something other than liberalism? Maybe a real kind of freedom. The kind of freedom that is grounded in the natural law. And when you want to bring back things like the natural law, you might want to bring back the balance of nature to your own body. Go check out Balance of Nature today. Speaking